All righty, we know that we are the panelist group that's just in front of our afternoon break. So we're going to do our best to stay on track and keep everybody interested so that we can get to the snacks that are out there. So first of all, thank you for allowing us to participate, especially to Ken and the team at Infoday, Texas. Maybe just a quick round of applause for Ken and the team. So it's a pleasure to be with you today. My name, as Ken mentioned, is Joe Eberly. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Growth Strategy at 4M Analytics. So before we kick off, I just want to say a little bit about what we're doing and then provide you with sort of the context around what digital transformation means and why it's so critical, especially in the utility industry. So a little bit about us. 4M is the first company to proactively deliver a utility map at scale that covers the entire United States. And we started right here in the great state of Texas. So our goal is to be the leader of digital transformation in the utility industry by unlocking utility data from millions of sources for use during the feasibility, pre-construction, design, delivery, and maintenance phases of the infrastructure lifecycle. You can think of by show of hands, how many of you have used Google Maps, Apple Maps, Waze Maps? So you can think of 4M as the Google Maps of the utility subsurface. That's our goal. So defining, implementing, and adopting a digital transformation paradigm is critical to ensuring that utility industry stakeholders are meeting the demands of utility management, utility coordination, and utility risk mitigation on infrastructure projects across the United States. And it goes without saying, the folks that are in the room today know this better than anybody. So a few data points that I'd like to share with you guys, and feel free if you know this data and maybe have a comment on it, feel free to provide your comments as you choose. By the way, the first one's a question. Does anybody know how much money is spent, let's say in 2021, on damage prevention in the utility owner space? Anybody have an idea what that number is? $5 billion, just in damage prevention measures by utility owners. In 2021, there were approximately 220,000 reported utility strikes or near misses, and that equated to $1.5 billion in cost to correct those utility strikes. So 1.5 billion versus 5 billion spent on the prevention measures by the utility owners. So for the MBAs out there, that represents a negative 70% ROI on the $5 billion. So the question then is, if we were to spend 10% more on damage prevention in the utility industry, should we expect a 10% reduction in the repair cost of those strikes? Well, the obvious answer is no, which is why digital transformation in the industry is so critical. So let's get started with an introduction of our panelists. I'm going to turn to Bruce here on my right. We'll start with Bruce and then we'll go down the line from there. Bruce.
Good afternoon. My name is Bruce Bacon. I am a pre-construction manager for Sunt Construction. Sunt Construction is out of Tempe, Arizona. We have office in Irving, Texas. That's our Texas office. We have work in San Antonio, Austin, and in the North Texas area. As a pre-construction manager, my role is to help select the project to bid, to work with the estimating staff to get it figured out, and then to work with the proposal teams as well to make sure that our proposal best reflects what our skill sets are.
Thank you, Bruce. Jon.
Good afternoon. My name is Jon King. I'm with VRX. We are a civil, environmental, structural, and utility and construction management firm headquartered in North Texas with offices through Texas and Oklahoma and New York. I'm the engineering manager for VRX, so I oversee our engineering department and also run our utilities department, which includes utility coordination and utility construction management for mostly state and municipal projects throughout the state of Texas.
Thank you, John.
Good afternoon. My name is Jon Campbell. I'm the Texas branch manager for T2 Utility Engineers. We're a utility investigation firm that performs the subsurface utility engineering investigations, utility coordination, that type of thing. More to the point is the 27 years that I spent with TxDOT, 20 of those being as the state's utility engineer and right-of-way director, where I dealt every day with the challenges of not knowing where all those utilities were on our 1.2 million acres of TxDOT right-of-way.
Last but not least, Patrick.
Is this working? Okay. I'm Patrick Anderson. I'm the Director of Business Development for Civil Corps. We're a small engineering survey company. We got 5 offices here in Texas. Headquarters is Victoria. I'm out of the Round Rock office. I actually was brought on board with Civil Corps to help develop business outside of TxDOT. Some of my background that you'll find out a little bit about is extensive background both in IT, digital transformations, work, a lot of with transit and rail, and with roadway. And I appreciate the fact that as a pinch hitter, I'm on the panel.
Great. Thank you, Pat. So let's come back down here to Bruce. I'd like to start with you, Bruce, if that's okay. So the first question that we have for you is, how can we expedite infrastructure projects through planning and design stages while minimizing the underground utilities and geologic risks on our future projects?
And how much time do we have? Because that's a lot.
25 minutes.
25 minutes. Okay. So we need to get better. As an industry, we need to get a lot better. We have way too many times that we are recreating the wheel. So if you think about as-built, for instance, how many times do we take as-built elevation shots on existing utilities as we're putting them in? And then where do they go? Where does that information go? It gets into a file somewhere and it's lost. We just don't do a good job of recording what is underground out there right now. And so how do we get better at this? If you remember, many years ago, we had to get our own utilities located. And so you would have to call many different owners to have them come out and mark it. Today, we have an 811 service. They'll come out and they'll mark everything for us. So we've gotten a little better, at least in controlling the locates. But then that information that is still underground that we can't see, where are these utilities? How deep are they? What's the rock that's under there? What's the elevation of the things that we can't see that puts the most risk dollars into our estimates? We've got to get better at finding that. So what have I seen in the process of getting better? I've seen some pretty innovative information. I know we're not supposed to plug products, but I did get to look behind the wheels at 4M, and I really like the product because it goes into a lot more detail than the standard GIS. So that helps us today, and that's some of the things that I think, if there's other products out there, I think we as an industry really need to open up the door and start considering those. We need to make that information available to the bidding firms and the designing firms so there's no surprises, no change orders.
Bruce, thank you. Jon Campbell, I'm going to jump over to you. What do you see as the most challenging hurdle to digital transformation in the SUE industry?
Well, the most challenging hurdle is the characteristic hurdle, and that is the information or the lack of information. Our technology now has started to expand and grow at such a rate that we're now able to capture these immense clouds of information with LiDAR and other sorts of capture techniques. So what we're now confronting is the fact that we're going to have to be able to make some sense of all this data that we're able to capture. We've just got more information that, as Bruce points out, that's not necessarily finding itself to the right places. So our biggest challenge is going to be putting in place those mechanisms by which to make some sense out of this data, to normalize it, and to be able to incorporate it into the investigation that you're attempting to perform. I'll take the opportunity to not promote a product, but promote a standard that's been put in place, a national standard by the American Society of Civil Engineers. We just published it in June of 2022, and it's called ASCE 75-22, and this is the as-built utility standard. For the very first time, we're going to have a standard against which to design those as-builts. Any of you ever worked with a utility as-built out here in our audience? Well, the one thing that I tell folks about the as-builts that you use is that gives you a good sense of where the utility is not. So what we want to do is to have an actual as-built, and there's never before been a standard that says, well, if you're capturing data on a utility as it goes into place, what is the data that you're capturing? How is that data going to be structured so that it can easily be shared across platforms and make it actually usable? So confronting that challenge, the proliferation of data, finding out how to characterize it, how to organize it, and then most importantly, how to share it is that hurdle that we've got to overcome. The good, exciting news is that we're there. The technology is there, and now it's just a matter of getting groups like this together to help determine what are those things we need and who needs to be in possession of them to go forward.
Thank you, Jon. Jon King, we're going to shift over to you, and we're going to go out to the field for a second with your question. What are some of the challenges faced in construction management with unforeseen conflicts or conditions discovered after design is complete, and how will digital delivery of utilities help in expediting conflict remediation in the field?
Well, kind of piggybacking off of what Bruce, because we kind of deal with the same thing. From a construction management side, one of our biggest challenges is taking the information that's given to us at the end of a plan production, 100% level, and reflecting that in the field. So we run into a lot of issues with either the utilities, like Jon was saying, the as-builts that were shown in the plans, or the level D or level C or level B data doesn't match what we find in the field. So immediately when the contractor shows up on site and either the utility is not found or we have a utility that's there that's unidentified, immediately it starts into the claim process of trying to get this utility either moved or relocated, or to find out if it actually is alive or abandoned. So we do a lot of challenges with determining if utilities have been abandoned too. So I think one of the challenges or one of the good things about digital transformation is that it gives us an ideal of where the actual utilities are located in the field, not just from an as-built that, sometimes if you're working in an urban location, some of your utilities might be 30 or 40 years old. Some of them might be hand-drawn that just show it sits 5 feet off the right-of-way line, but where's the right-of-way line in 1940? So having an actual digital map or a digital update of the data is going to become very important for us, not only to progress the project forward, but for our partners being the owner, whether it's state or municipal, or the contractor, working with the contractor to identify if these utilities are actually live or they are abandoned, to keep the project moving forward. Because once we stop, that's where the clock starts ticking on construction claims and delays. And that's what we're trying to avoid at all times.
Jon, thank you. Patrick, over to you. Your first question is, when an organization is considering digital technology solutions, what are some of the things that an organization needs to take into account?
Good question. And several aspects of that too, that I'm going to redefine some of the concept of digital transformation. And if you'll bear with me for a second, it's the advancement methodologies, ability to use the data and to be able to use it accurately and better. One of the things that I look at in my background, I've been overseeing some enterprise-wide strategic implementations from IT as well as with the engineering. The company I'm with is about 115 people. And so we're always looking at what's the next methodology? What's the new technology that we can use that's going to help us advance? And I break down any kind of a technological or a digital transformation from kind of a holistic viewpoint. You got your database, you got your access to the database, and then you got your application. Understanding one thing, all the digital transformation is useless if it doesn't solve a business issue. So IT and all the digital transformation needs to address a business solution. Utilities is a huge one. One of the reasons why we're up here on this stage today. So I take a look at it from the different components. What's the database? Is the database good? How accurate is it? You know, we're talking about getting the information in, as-built versus reality. Of course, that's always going to be adjusted. So in a case like that, is your database being updated on a regular time? Access to it. Where's your data stored? You know, is it in a hardened facility? Do you still own it? And how do you actually utilize it on the other end of it from the application? How can you extract it, use it, and put it into your current engineering design, your plans, so that you present a good solution? So I look at that from that aspect, from a holistic standpoint, for digital transformation of any kind of data. Is it going to give me a competitive advantage? Is it going to give me good data? And can I actually use it for a business solution? That's a very simple aspect of it, though.
Thank you, Patrick. Bruce, I'm going to come back over to you for your second question. What are the dangers of not advancing the technology to bring these improvements from the future into the present?
So when I was in college, we had a favorite professor. It was LSU. His name was Duncan Kinchin. And Duncan Kinchin was one day erasing the board. We had a couple weeks left in the semester. And someone said, "Hey, Duncan, we're about to graduate. Give us words of wisdom." And he was erasing the board because we used chalk and erasers back then. But as he was erasing the board, without missing a beat, he said, "Change or you'll be left behind." And that was in 1984. And that's been something that stuck with me through the years. I think it's a very important aspect. If we don't change, we're going to be left behind the rest of the world. So that's just a kind of an image, a functionality concern. But if you start to go back to some of the ROI numbers that Joe mentioned early on, when we start talking about, are we getting the return on our investments for money spent to protect things that are in place, that should be a focus. That should be a focus for this industry. So Penn State, let me do Purdue first. Purdue, 1996, put out a study that said that for every dollar that according to their study, that was put in place to improve and quantify the subsurface utility explorations, it saved them $4.62. That was $4.62 to the owner of that utility. And so then Penn State has even a bigger number. Their number in 2007 was for every dollar spent protecting and quantifying and trying to remove the risk of what's underground, the guessing of what's underground, for every dollar spent was $21. And that is a huge return on an investment. I'd take that any day. So that's financial side, but what about the lives that are being put in jeopardy? And Joe mentioned earlier about utility strikes. So there were 421 deaths in the last 20 years that were all attributed to utility strikes. So in 2015, which was the last data that I could find on this, Texas accounted for 16% of all utility strikes in the United States and Canada combined. And that's kind of dubious to me. I don't think that's a stat we want to go forward with. So there's a lot of factors that I think that we need to consider and reasons to move forward so that we're saving lives, we're improving the return on our investment, and we're getting better, and we're not going to get left behind.
Thank you, Bruce. Jon Campbell, with infrastructure funding at historic highs, what is the most pressing challenge when that money starts flowing into the market?
Well, and we're seeing that happen here in Texas. We're getting a disproportionate amount of the infrastructure money brought into Texas. The very first thing that we've got to be conscious of and we've got to set up for is that the opportunists out there will try to take advantage of the funds that are available. And we want to make sure that we're cautious about spending the funds that are going to be here appropriately, effectively, and efficiently, because that's where it really can make the biggest difference. Bruce just quoted a couple of studies that were performed early in the life of the subsurface utility engineering practice. And those studies were done in order to convince the project owners and the pipeline owners, the various utility owners, that it was worth their while to go and invest this money in finding out where some of these subsurface utilities were before they went to design, so it could inform their design, help them to design a better project, help them to avoid some of those conflicts that you're only going to find in the construction phase. But most importantly, the money is coming here because our public, the U.S. public, decided this is what we want to do with our tax funds. We want to fund infrastructure. And so we've also got to keep in mind not just the cost to our project, the cost in lives when the worst things happen, but also the costs of utility customers losing that service. All you have to do is to go through one freeze here in Austin and you start to really appreciate how much you depend upon not just your power, your electricity, your gas, but your internet service and your internet connection. So we've got to be conscious to the fact that as these projects come forward to try to take advantage of the money that's going to be here, a lot of bad projects are going to be built. A lot of things that aren't going to actually contribute to the bottom line are going to find their way to the front. We want to make sure that we're making enough focused investment in the kinds of things that are going to reduce this risk as possible. And again, I think the things that you do to reduce this risk, it was a dream of mine back when I was a young utility coordinator for TxDOT that, hey, someday we'll be able to know at just a glance where all the utilities are that in front of a project that we're designing. Fast forward 30 years and I started to realize, wow, the technology is evolving so quickly that we're actually going to realize what I thought was just a dream 30 years ago. And now I work for a company at the end of my career that is in the practice of going out there and doing these investigations to find out where these utilities are, remove that uncertainty of the unknown, and really start to contribute to the bottom line in terms of the value that the public receives when we build an infrastructure project. It moves according to its schedule. It doesn't have as many unanticipated delays due to utilities that are found, at the tip of the backhoe bucket. And most importantly, the utility customers don't suffer those lacks in service, that continuous service that we all come to take for granted.
Thank you, Jon. Jon King, back over to you. What do you see as the future when you take into account emerging technologies such as utility mapping? What do you see as the impact to the folks in the field around safety, around the number of hours that it takes to do the work from a field perspective?
Well, I think kind of like what Jon was speaking on, the cost of any kind of disruption to services when a utility strike is hit is we can't put a dollar value on it at this time because it affects so many different people and there's so many different ways. And so we really are looking for different ways in just improving how we identify where utilities are. And once we have that type of technology where, the days of, if we can go out into the field and see where the utilities are, just from the beginning of our project, from a construction standpoint, it goes a much longer way. And also for us to be able to identify if some of those utilities are abandoned or are in conflict with our other facilities, goes a long way on that too. So I think, from a safety standpoint, having a technology, which is what we're advancing towards, of the digital transformation of where we send out crews to identify a fiber optic line or a gas line, puts a lot of resources into the field, puts them into dangerous situations, especially in an urban environment where there's a lot of traffic and different types of facilities that are right next to the pavement. It puts a lot of resources, in dangerous situations. So we're looking for different ways that we can, gather this information, digitally, electronically, and for it to be accurate too, that we can then reduce the number of labor and man hours that we put out into the field, which will help our workers to be more safe, especially from a design standpoint, where we do the SUE ahead of the construction side, but also from a construction side, when we do find either utilities or have to identify utilities, we're sending more and more resources out in the field to be able to identify those. So it lessens the amount. So really this utility transformation is going to help in that situation to lessen that.
Thank you, John. Patrick, you mentioned a moment ago that Civil Corp is a relatively small organization. I think you mentioned a little over 100 employees at Civil Corp. How is digital transformation affecting smaller companies like your company for engineering and survey? And what is your approach to digital transformation? Does it differ as a small organization versus, let's say, a larger organization?
There's going to be some similarities and some real differences between a small organization and a large one. From our perspective, we're about 115 people, professionals, and if we are not working with the leading edge, not bleeding edge, but the leading edge of technology and transformation, we are not going to be competitive. Our goal is to be competitive and also to deliver all our information in a top tier manner to our clients and take care of them, okay? Larger companies have an ability, of course, to be able to play with a lot more technologies, develop it up in-house, be able to work with that. We don't. We go the opposite aspect of it in the fact that we start working with other companies like 4M, and I'll be straight with you right now. We're looking at their system right now. We see some real value. I haven't quite vetted it yet. I'll just be straight on that, and he knows that. We have looked at other technologies too. We are the survey and utility lead for the preliminary engineering on one of the largest BRT corridors right now, going through that. And in that project alone, we're using both the typical methodology for utilities, the calls and all of that, but we've also been evaluating some other new techniques. Now, new techniques in this aspect, we're using old tools that are being processed a little differently. And for instance, in one instance, we tried a system, and I'll be honest with you, it didn't work out. But you know what? We invested the nickel in that one to find out if it was going to work, and now I can say I vetted that one as not applicable for this particular area. We're looking at other ones. We've tested another one both in Austin as well as in Houston. Mixed results. One area looked good, another one didn't. And we're looking at other technologies, other opportunities from using digital transformation to help us be competitive and to deliver at a better tier to our clients, to give them good information. So from that aspect, digital transformation for smaller companies, it impacts our competitiveness and impacts our ability to innovate and keep ahead of the curve. We're all in this for the same thing. We want to grow. The idea of just surviving is, forget that. We want to prosper and grow. And that's very strong for us to be able to look at these different techniques, these different opportunities. How can we do something better and bigger? I'm going to give two shameless plugs here. One is for 4M in that their system sure looks good. And as I told you, I'm looking at the three different aspects of it: the data, the access, and then also the application. And then I'm going to give you one more shameless plug, and that is for Civil Corp. I've worked for a lot of very large companies, done a lot of huge work, and when I first interviewed with Civil Corp, I was actually about to go with a much larger company in Houston, and at the end of the interview, I told the owner of the company, I said, darn it, now you got me interested in you. The reason why was because he looked at it from the aspect of technology, methodology. What do we have to be looking for? How can we improve it? He wasn't satisfied with sitting where we were and doing things the same way. And that's where we have to continue to evolve, change on a continual basis. And so, from my aspect, two main words for how does it impact small companies: our competitiveness and our ability to deliver as a top tier. We got to stay out there on the leading edge, not the bleeding edge. So whenever we get a system, I do an IVV on it. I investigate it, I verify it, and I validate it. Once I get to that point, I turn it over to my engineers, say, is this legitimate? And if they say yes, fine. If they say no, I kick it to the curb. So yeah, we have to continually be looking. I hope that answered.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, for that answer. So we have about 2 minutes left. I want to put each of us here on sort of in the spotlight for just a second and do a bit of a speed round. So with digital transformation as the backdrop, what is the number one priority for you and your organization in the next 24 months? Bruce, I'll start with you.
It's just ultra important that we do everything we can as an industry to advance this. I think in terms of subsurface digital twinning models, I've seen how fast our estimators are as they shifted from Bluebeam technology takeoffs to microstation takeoffs. I'm excited that one day I'll be able to watch them do digital twinning takeoffs.
Jon King?
Kind of piggybacking off that, I think the speed that we can get the data into the system is going to take us to another level for utilities, where we spend a lot of man hours looking at either paper records or PDFs of poor quality, to be able to take it and put it into a digital side where we can get the data within relatively a couple hours is going to really advance the industry on that side.
Thank you, John. Jon Campbell?
In our business, one of the most arduous, time-consuming parts of the utility investigation is the records compilation and the records management that you're going to then use to go out in truth on the ground. The kind of digitalization, the kind of technologies we see coming now, 4M's product is one that cloud sources all of the utility information that's ever been put out in the public domain. And that's an incredible savings in terms of being able to get to a much more comprehensive data set of the existing utilities, as well as then informs the more specific investigation that you have to do on the ground to truth that information. I gave you 2 seconds.
Got 2 seconds, Patrick.
Well, you just ate that up too. Yeah. Just a couple of words. We need to be open to the different solutions. You need to verify and validate what you're looking at. And is the digital transformation really providing a good business solution? That can. I mean, it's obvious that we've all been talking here. The utilities is a huge area where we can do that. And so, be open, validate it, and keep evolving.
All righty, that's our time. Thank you very much for attending our session. And thank you especially to our panelists. Thanks so much.